The Frank White recall election has been a long time coming, and it's happening right now. We are hearing from many of you on the text line. We'll take your calls as well if you have been out to the polling locations yet in Kansas City or around Jackson County. Get your feel on how it went, what you're expecting today. But, of course, today's just not about Frank White. It's not just about who the next county executive is going to be, which we don't know yet how that's going to play out. If the legislature doesn't decide on somebody, then it will be decided by a judge. That's how this works.
I'm not confident they're going to choose someone amongst themselves very easily.
I don't think they will.
Okay.
I believe a judge will ultimately make that call.
I think so.
Because there's too many egos in there who want to be the next county executive. So it's not about who's next, but it's also about, and more so about, what this means for the Chiefs and the Royals. I believe the Chiefs and the Royals have been quietly anticipating and counting down to today because they have not been able to get anywhere with Frank White. Frank White, of course, has beef with the Royals that goes back to his playing and post-playing days, and he's got that chip on his shoulder that he has never given up, and he has never wanted to really play ball, no pun intended, with the Royals getting a new stadium anywhere. And with the Chiefs, he's had a half-hearted approach to trying to figure out how to keep the Chiefs in Jackson County. He had this proposal where they would get some of the 3/8 cent sales tax extension that, of course, they're currently getting, but also kick a portion of that to, basically a Jackson County slush fund. And Frank White did that under the guise of, we're also trying to help out the little guy. No, it was just Frank White going for a county-wide money grab is all it was. And basically admitting to the teams, we don't really want to work with you on anything, but we'll pretend like we do. It was all for show. So now these two teams and their ownership groups wait. And they wait for Frank White to be recalled today, which I believe is ultimately going to happen, and it will be an overwhelming vote to recall Frank White. That's why he tried at the last minute yesterday to get the recall election postponed. Thankfully, the courts basically said, yeah, that ain't happening, buddy. Sorry. But these two teams also obviously have a lucrative offer from Kansas, where they have the star bond opportunity on the table, where they can figure out if they can draw a star bond district, how to get up to 70% of the stadium paid for via basically sales tax revenues inside of this made-up star bond district. So whether it's the Royals at 119th and Null or it's the Chiefs out, somewhere in the Legends, Wyandotte County area, they can figure out a way to build a new stadium and potentially get a lot of it paid for by added tax revenues. That's also something that is on the table right now.
I'm with you on the teams there. So building on what you're saying, if they're waiting on this decision today on the recall election, I'm not personally seeing that anything will get done before the end of the year, though, right? I think we'll have a protracted appointment of his successor, and then we'll go from there. But then we're into the holidays.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know the teams have to decide here in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Because the Kansas Star Bond deadline is December 31st.
Aha. So something will have to happen.
Ty Masterson, the Senate president in Kansas, made it very clear on this show that they need something by the end of October because they have to take a few weeks to review what the teams submit to the state of Kansas. They have to have a realistic star bond district that would imply that this area of this part of Kansas would benefit from a stadium. Therefore, any additional sales tax revenues should be used to pay off the stadium bonds. The deadline is December 31st. Now, is there a chance that Kansas extends that star bond offer again? Sure, why not? I do think that's possible. They've already extended it once. Why wouldn't they keep kicking the can down the road? It really doesn't matter to them. They're in the conversation. I mean, at some point, I do think you have to have some self-respect, but it doesn't really benefit them to just say, this is our deadline. I say that with no joy. I want the deadline to come and go. I want these teams to finally make a freaking decision, but there's no evidence that they're really intent on doing that. So for the Chiefs and the Royals, you look at this right now and you say to yourself, what are we waiting for? You're sitting there right now and you're waiting to see if the Frank White recall allows you to do business in Jackson County. That's what you're waiting for. And for the Chiefs, you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, okay, do we want to stay here? Do we want to stay at Arrowhead? Or do we want to start fresh? By staying there, you need a local element. Kiesman noted this yesterday, and he's right to point out that you cannot get the state benefits of up to 50% of the monies for a new stadium or stadium upgrades from the state without having a local component. But that local sales tax component in Jackson County, that 3/8 sales tax that right now is split between the Chiefs and the Royals, is absolutely crucial. You need that to get the state money. If the Royals go to North Kansas City, they need a local sales tax to tap into any state money. Both parties need that if they want to stay in Missouri. And I believe they can get it. I think the Chiefs can certainly get it in Jackson County. I've said for a long time, if the Royals leave Jackson County and the Chiefs go to the ballot and say, listen, we're going to cut that 3/8 sales tax in half. We're giving you a sales tax break in Jackson County. You're giving us the same money. That's a win for everybody. Because the windfall, the tens of millions of dollars that they collect that goes to stadium upgrades and improvements and maintenance, Kansas can't match that. One of the other things, in talking to people who are on the inside circle of this conversation, that they believe gets overlooked, is that in Kansas, first off, there's no guarantee you can get to 70% with a realistic Star Bond district. Paying off 70% of a $4 billion NFL stadium with Star Bonds, how big does that district have to be to pay off, let's say, $3 billion in bonds? You have to have a pretty darn lucrative Star Bond district to make that work. So it's not just about 70%. It's figuring out how to make the math work to get to 70%. And that's where I think the teams are struggling right now. And then there's also the fact that right now, Jackson County just basically cuts them a check. Every single month, they're just getting basically taxpayer money for maintenance and upgrades and things of that nature. You go to Kansas, that's all on you. You own everything. You don't get anything for maintenance. Now, maybe the state of Kansas will kick in for some ingress, egress, things like that, but you don't actually get anything else. That windfall of just straight cash that they get from Jackson County right now, from the people I've talked to, is underappreciated based on this decision-making process as it currently stands. And that is not something that Kansas is offering at this point. I suppose they could go to a local element, but trust me, that's a big deal that both of these teams really like to have. And it means a lot to them to be able to just cash that check every single month and know that it's going to be there. So you can't discount the fact that the property's technically not owned by you, but the maintenance you handle through taxpayer monies. And in Kansas, you're starting from scratch. You've got a brand new building that, yes, won't need upgrades for a period of time, but when it does, well, you're going to be on the hook for it. That's how it works right now in Kansas. That could change, but that's currently how this potential deal is set up. And there's a part of the teams that are like, you know what? Do we really want to own that stadium? Or do we kind of like this Jackson County model where we don't have to technically own it, but we get all the benefits of being the maintainer and effectively the owner without actually being the owner? And that's why the sooner that Frank White is gone after today's recall election, the closer we get to a decision. And I don't think the teams are just sitting here waiting around for Frank to get recalled because they're then dying to jump to Kansas. That doesn't make any sense to me. The Star Bond deal has been sitting out there for a year and a half now, and they haven't jumped. I'm not saying they won't. I'm not saying it's still not possible they do it, but they're not sitting around waiting on this deal because they think it's the greatest deal in the world, and they're afraid that Kansas will come to its senses and take that deal off the table. There's something still attractive about what's going on the Missouri side of the state line. But one of the last big hurdles is likely to come to fruition today, and that is the recall of Frank White. If you've been out to the polling locations this morning, many of you on the text line have been there, and you are saying that there has been a steady flow of people. Now, it's going to move quickly. The lines will move fast, okay, because there's one thing to vote on. That's it. It's just the Frank White recall. So you show up. I got to imagine, based on what I'm seeing so far on the text line, you'll be in and out in less than 5 minutes. Get out there. Go vote today, Jackson County and Kansas City. Find your polling location before you go out. And let's try to change the trajectory of Jackson County as a whole.